You've mentioned nation states holding Bitcoin. We're at Bitcoin 2024 here in Nashville. The headliner for this event, unbelievably so, is Donald Trump tomorrow, speaking at 2 p.m. And he has recently kind of made a pivot on his views on Bitcoin. He now seems to be much more of a proponent. Do you see the possibility of the United States moving into a stage where we actually have a national Bitcoin reserve? And if so, do you think other countries would emulate that strategy?
Absolutely. The U.S. is the single largest holder of gold in the world. The dollar's not backed by gold, but gold allows the U.S. to project power into financial markets. Other countries hold gold as their reserve. And actually, it was the holding of gold that drove Nixon to decouple the dollar from gold, because other countries were withdrawing their gold from the U.S. system because they saw the spending that was going on at that period of time, and they thought the U.S. would go bankrupt. So the U.S. government holds a lot of gold. They're the largest landowner in this country. They own about 28% of the land in the country. And what recently happened was the expiration of the petrodollar, which was this agreement where the commodity producers would price their commodity in dollars in protection for, in exchange for protection from the U.S., and then they would invest that in treasuries, right? That's now gone. And so we've seen the U.S. as a reserve currency drop in significance, and it's now down sub 50% as a holding asset. The Chinese now buy gold instead of treasuries. Japan, which was one of the biggest buyers of U.S. treasuries as they were going through their recent financial situation, have now also tapered. Comically, one of the largest buyers of treasury bills, which are short-term, is Tether. Right? They're the sixth largest buyer. They buy at a nation-state level.
How ironic.
Right? And so the U.S. needs to fund its debt somehow. And if people aren't buying dollars or putting things in dollars, that is a precarious situation. So that leaves the U.S. with only a couple of alternatives. They either have to let the dollar drop in value significantly and have high inflation so they can inflate away the debt, but that would be disastrous. The other thing they can do is they can invest in an asset like Bitcoin, which will over time appreciate in value. And if it can appreciate at a rate faster than the U.S. total debt appreciates, then now you have something you can use to offset the debt over time. And if the U.S. were to hold 2 million Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin goes to $20 million over 10, 20, 30 years, then now all of a sudden the U.S. would be holding at $20 million, roughly 40 trillion plus. Well, the federal debt today is 35 trillion and growing. And there's no way the government can service that debt at current inflation levels, interest rate levels. Right? And so the minute the U.S. does it, they will now have the ability to project power in the Bitcoin market because they will have pricing power because of their supply, just like they do with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Why does the administration sell oil out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? To drop the price of gasoline, to lower inflation. Right? Why does the Strategic Petroleum Reserve exist? Well, it was to protect us from price shocks in the outside market. Well, today the U.S. is arguably the largest oil producer in the world. And so they have the ability to not suffer the consequences of high international oil prices in the same way. But if the U.S. does it, then everybody else is going to have to do it, because you can't be a country and not have a strategic reserve of Bitcoin if all the other countries have it.
Right.
And countries like Russia, China, and others look at Bitcoin as a neutral currency that isn't controlled by a government or a country, that allows them to trade independent of any sanctions the U.S. would ever do. And so if the U.S. wants to keep them from trading in violation of sanctions, they have to also have enough Bitcoin so they can impact that market. And so it becomes an issue of national security, which has nothing to do with cybersecurity or anything like that. And when President Trump talks about we should have all Bitcoin mining in the U.S. Part of that is a thinking that if you have Bitcoin mining in the U.S., then you have the ability to determine what transactions get processed, which is why every single sovereign who wants to hold Bitcoin is going to want to have mining in their country, and which is why they're all going to want to operate their own mining pools so that you can't essentially through sanctions, OFAC, et cetera, control their ability to transact in Bitcoin. So the implications of Bitcoin becoming a sovereign reserve asset are that every country in the world who wants to hold Bitcoin should have Bitcoin mining in it, which will lead to a huge decentralization of Bitcoin mining, right? And that will force Bitcoin miners to have to become super efficient at what they do.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.